Georgia, 1861. The judge who shared his wife with 3 former slaves. In the spring of 1861, as the American Civil War began to tear the country in two, an extraordinary story quietly unfolded on an isolated property in the interior of Georgia. This is the story of people whose lives intertwined in ways that defied all the social conventions of their time. Judge Cornelius Weatherby was known throughout Wilkinson County as a man of unbending principles and rigorous judicial decisions. At 52 years old, he had built an impeccable reputation during 3 decades in court. His property, known as Magnolia Grove, stretched across 200 acres of fertile land along the banks of the Oconee River. What made Judge Weatherby different from his contemporaries was not only his legal position, but his personal convictions about slavery. While his neighbors expanded their plantations with enslaved labor, Cornelius struggled internally with the moral contradiction of his society. He had inherited only 3 slaves from his father: Benjamin, a 40-year-old man with exceptional carpentry skills; Samuel, 35 years old, with deep knowledge of agriculture; and Joshua, the youngest, at 28, gifted with sharp intelligence and the ability to read and write secretly. You are on the Uncle Thomas's channel, the only place where these stories are told without filters. Leave your like and comment saying which part of the world you're watching us from. Subscribe to see more content as interesting as this. The judge's wife, Margaret Weatherby, was a woman of singular beauty and independent spirit. At 43 years old, she maintained an elegant posture and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see beyond superficial appearances. Educated in the North, in Boston, Margaret had brought with her progressive ideas that frequently shocked the conservative society of the South. The Weatherbys' marriage was peculiar. Although they respected each other deeply, romantic passion had transformed into an intellectual partnership over the years. They conversed for hours about philosophy, politics, and morality, but the fire of physical desire had quietly extinguished, replaced by a fraternal complicity. It was Margaret who first proposed the radical idea. During a candlelit dinner, she observed, "Cornelius, if you truly believe these men deserve freedom, why don't we grant it while we can still make a difference?" The judge pondered lengthily. The liberation of slaves in the South of 1861 was not only controversial, but potentially dangerous. It could cost him his career, his reputation, perhaps even his life. After weeks of deliberation, Cornelius made an extraordinary decision. He would formally free Benjamin, Samuel, and Joshua, but offer them the opportunity to remain on the property as free men, receiving fair wages and adequate housing. The liberation occurred on a rainy April afternoon. In Cornelius's office, with legal documents meticulously prepared, the 3 men heard words they never imagined hearing. "You are free men." Benjamin wept openly. Samuel remained in shocked silence. Joshua, the most eloquent, simply asked, "Why?" Cornelius's answer was honest. "Because keeping another human being in captivity contradicts everything I claim to defend in law and in life. Because I recognize in you the same humanity I claim for myself." All 3 accepted to remain at Magnolia Grove. The property became a radical social experiment, a community where former slaves and their former masters worked side by side as equals. The news quickly spread throughout the county, generating scandal and indignation among neighboring planters. It was in this turbulent context that something even more extraordinary happened. Margaret, feeling isolated by the growing hostility of local society, found comfort in deep conversations with Joshua, whose secret education had made him surprisingly erudite. They discussed literature, shared perspectives on humanity and justice. Gradually, a mutual attraction blossomed between Margaret and Joshua. She recognized in him an intellectual soulmate, someone who understood her frustrations with the limitations imposed on women and the enslaved. Joshua saw in Margaret not only physical beauty, but moral courage and rare authenticity. Margaret approached Cornelius with brutal honesty. "I have developed feelings for Joshua that I cannot ignore. I do not wish to dishonor you, but neither can I live in denial of my heart." To Margaret's surprise, Cornelius did not react with anger or jealousy. Instead, he responded with philosophical understanding. "Our marriage has always been based on mutual respect and truth. If your happiness lies in exploring these feelings, I will not be the one to prevent you." What followed was a completely unprecedented arrangement. With Cornelius's explicit consent, Margaret began an intimate relationship with Joshua. Simultaneously, daily coexistence on the property created deep bonds between Margaret, Benjamin, and Samuel. Each of these men contributed something unique to her emotional and intellectual life. Benjamin, with his skilled hands and gentle spirit, offered stability and practical comfort. Samuel, with his deep knowledge of the land and natural philosophy, shared with her a spiritual connection to nature. Joshua provided intellectual stimulation and romantic passion. Cornelius observed this development with a mixture of anthropological fascination and philosophical acceptance. He understood that he was witnessing something revolutionary, not only the breaking of racial barriers, but also the deconstruction of traditional matrimonial structures. In his private notes, he wrote, "I have discovered that true love does not diminish when shared, but multiplies. Margaret's happiness has become my own happiness." The Magnolia Grove property transformed into a peculiar refuge from the storm ravaging the country. While bloody battles occurred hundreds of miles away, this small community experimented with a radically different form of social organization. Shared dinners around a large table became daily rituals where everyone, Cornelius, Margaret, Benjamin, Samuel, and Joshua, discussed current events, shared stories, and planned for the future. Naturally, scandal was inevitable. Rumors about the depraved arrangements at Magnolia Grove circulated through the county's taverns and churches. Some neighbors demanded legal intervention, others threatened violence. Cornelius faced growing pressure to resign from his judgeship. But Judge Weatherby remained firm. In a memorable judicial decision, he publicly declared, "The law protects private property and individual autonomy. What occurs within the boundaries of my property among freely consenting adults is not a matter for the state or society. I judge cases based on law, not on popular moral prejudice." This statement, though courageous, did not prevent consequences. The Weatherby family was progressively isolated socially. Invitations to events ceased. Previously cordial business dealings became hostile. There was real danger of vigilantism. It was Benjamin who suggested the solution. "We must leave Georgia. There are places in the north where we can live with more freedom." The idea gained traction. Cornelius, now seeing his judicial position becoming untenable, reluctantly agreed. Margaret, always adventurous, embraced the possibility of a fresh start. In the spring of 1862, the group of 5 adults departed secretly during the night, taking only the essentials. They traveled through dangerous routes, constantly fearing capture or worse. The journey of almost 1,000 kilometers to Pennsylvania took weeks, testing their physical endurance and mutual commitment. They finally settled in a small rural community near Lancaster, where they purchased a modest farm with money that Cornelius had managed to transfer secretly. There, Far from the judging eyes of the South, they built an extraordinary life. Cornelius did not resume legal practice, preferring to dedicate himself to farming and writing. He began to document his experience, producing philosophical manuscripts about freedom, love, and society that would remain unpublished during his lifetime. Margaret flourished intellectually, becoming active in local abolitionist circles. Her unique perspective, a Southern woman who chose solidarity with former slaves over racial privilege, made her a sought-after speaker. Benjamin established a prosperous carpentry business. Samuel cultivated the land with mastery, producing abundant harvests. Joshua, finally able to fully exercise his intelligence, became a teacher at a school for freed black children. The domestic arrangement remained fluid and unconventional. Margaret maintained intimate relationships with the three men, each offering different dimensions of companionship. Cornelius, although not participating sexually in these relationships, remained an integral part of the extended family, contributing wisdom, stability, and genuine affection. Over time, the local community in Lancaster, initially distrustful, came to accept this unusual family. Their productivity, honesty in business, and community contributions gradually overcame initial prejudices. Children were eventually born, descendants whose lineages mixed all the complexities of that extraordinary union. The story of the Weatherbys and their companions was never widely known. They deliberately lived outside the historical spotlight, preferring the tranquility of their private lives to public scrutiny. Cornelius died peacefully in 1878, surrounded by all those he loved. Margaret survived another 10 years, maintaining until the end her spiritual independence and refusing to apologize for choices that brought genuine happiness. Benjamin, Samuel, and Joshua remained loyal until their own ends, honoring the memory of the man who had granted them freedom and the woman who had offered them unconditional love. Their descendants spread throughout the country, carrying with them a family story that seemed like fiction but represented profound truths about human capacity to transcend social limitations. This story invites us to reflect on moral courage, unconventional love, and possibilities of human community beyond rigid structures. The questions they faced about freedom, belonging, desire, and dignity remain deeply relevant, echoing through the centuries to our own complex times. Now choose one of these options appearing on your screen and continue with us until the next video.